joining us today. Um, I'm George Pearson. I'm a PA. I've been practicing for about 35 years. My degrees in family practice, and this is um, Education is the Best Medicine. We are a one of the shows that are umbrellaed by Eyes of the Conscious Soul of Miss Barbara Harvard. And we want to thank her for her support. And we want to thank Curtis for his and all the folks at Believe Radio. We are growing, we are developing, and we hope you continue to tune in. Um, Today is a day um, I want to take a different direction. And first of all, I want to suggest everyone take a look at these hearings. They're really interesting. In regards to January 6th and the events of January 6th. I just think it's important for people to educate themselves and to make some decisions and to understand the issues like we're going to discuss today. And today is a show on reparations. And at first, I'm not a person that believes in reparations. Um, but what I am a believer in is the historical context in which the request for these for reparations exists. Um, I think that people need to kind of understand that for a number of years we grew up with the concept that this was a fair, equal, and balanced system, and it is, but it depends on who you are, where you came from, your historical lineage in the society. All those things play a factor in the Horatio Alger story, the pulling oneself up by the bootstraps story. Um, I grew up in a time where, as an African American man, you had to get educated. Went to Stanford. You had to get really educated, so I went to UCSF. And you had to work, and you had to be a little bit better than everybody else in order to get the same treatment or base treatment. And so um, I wanted to kind of first define reparations, and reparations is defined as repairing, um, and it's plural, in the act of making amends, offering expiration or giving satisfaction for a wrong or injury, something done or given as amends for satisfaction. So I thought that was kind of important to understand the context of what a number of folks have been talking about in terms of reparations, and what it means for African American. And we're talking about, again, I'm very clear about this when I first started the show. We're talking about the folks that are part of the 1619 project in regards to the first 20 Africans that were enslaved and that started this story, uh, this our journey. And um, so California has embarked upon looking at this question. They developed a reparations task force, was established under Assembly Bill 3121, S. Weber. And, and they had the initial report done in 2020. And the reason why you haven't heard about it because they were putting the paper together. And I think that in this time uh, history of lack of truth telling, of the discussions around fairness and equity. I want to again give a great shout out to the LGBT family and brotherhood and sisterhood and personhood. Enjoy your day, enjoy your week, enjoy your month. You deserve it. Um, and so the legislature decided that this particular report uh, would be created and disseminated by 2023. This first paper it is the first iteration, and this is the information I'm taking from it. Anyone can go look at it. Just go look up white paper reparations, and what you'll pull up is the entire document. It's about 500 pages. It has great executive summary. I just think it's good reading because it layers this context in a factual, information-based manner as opposed to attitudes and ideology. Um, and so the law requires the reparation task force to be recommended to appropriate remedies of compensation, rehabilitation, and restitution for African Americans with a special consideration for descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. I'll read that again. It says the law requires the Reparation Task Force to recommend appropriate remedies of compensation, rehabilitation, and restitution for African Americans with special consideration for descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. Now, the question should come to mind, why us? And that's a part of the problem. Why us? Well, why not us? Every group that has been wronged by these United States in this Constitution, and we have special ranking because in the Constitution is one of tenements, we are 3/5 of a human being. Again, Africans that were descendants of slaves, 1619, uh, that's what we're talking about. And I think that I don't want to confuse that picture because um, to be a part of a most peculiar institution, to have your descendants be a part of this peculiar institution, and then to not have it understood in its implications of America has been America's best secret. It's its best kept secret. So now you hear some of the people talk about enslavers. So enslavers would be defined as, you should go look it up, is those that enslaved other people. So, um, and then some of the psychology behind it. It says that it's called cognitive dissonance. You can read it about it. Dr. George Takuri kind of talks about it a lot, and it's a psychological discussion about in order to treat you any way I want you, or to treat you subhuman, I have to first um, make unimportant your existence, your birth, your name, your family, your history. Those things become unimportant if I'm to make you a slave. And so the law requires Reparations Task Force to recommend appropriate remedies of compensation, rehabilitation, and restitution for African Americans with special consideration for descendants of persons enslaved in the United States. This executive summary synthesizes many of the preliminary findings and recommendations for the Reparations Task Force. So thoroughly, they have the effects of slavery, have they affected every aspect of American society for the last 400 years. So understand, if you understand slavery, you understand America. Now, when I first started practicing about 30 years ago, because the context in which I had to provide health care was one that said that nothing had happened to us, there was no harm to us, there was no trauma to us, that we had been given a fair shot, and all our problems were ours. And I submit to you that that's not true. Um, so this paper is studying the effects of slavery in a broad spectrum of American history, but as it really relates to California. So California had a unique, and hopefully over the next couple of months, we'll talk about the unique aspect of California as a slave state, because it's, historically they've tried to make north, south, east, west, but if this was a slave state in 1619, then It was a slave state in the entire country. Just wasn't one state. Um, and I think about, some of the slave laws that when you ran from your master, you could be returned to your master wherever you had left. That was There was no place that you could run in America and be free. So inadvertently, for the states that tried to separate the North from the South, the East from the West, this was a peculiar institution that was solidified in the Constitution, which, as the Supreme Court says, if it's not in the Constitution, it doesn't exist. Well, that's not true, but we understand that slavery exists in the Constitution. It was a part of its mix. It was part of America's mental, physical, spiritual, and economic mix. And that's why we know there's a wealth gap now. So, and the paper goes on to say, and I just like to read from kind of comment from it because it's a really well put together document. I submit that everyone should read it and review it and understand in the context of California what that meant for the prosperity of California. Um, it says, so in order to maintain slavery, government actors adopted white supremacist beliefs and passed laws to create racial hierarchy. I'm better than you, black skin. We play it out as African Americans, light skin, dark skin. So that's how deep the trauma goes. That it goes so deep that we were separated not just by human, we were separated by color. It's not uncommon. A number of countries do that, but ours is unique in the fact that it created a caste system, which exists today. Um, and so, uh, in order for in order to maintain slavery, government actors and whites adopted white supremacist beliefs and passed laws to create a racial hierarchy to control both enslaved free Africans. Uh, the U.S. Constitution recognized African Americans as citizens on paper. The government failed to give them the full rights of citizenship and failed to protect and often sanction or directly participate in African Americans from widespread terror and violence. Um, in other words, lynchings. In other words, the burning down of black towns. In other words, the wholesale murder and brutalization of a young man named Emmett Till. And those, I bring up Emmett Till because the year he was murdered was the year I was born. So just think about the kind of historical things that have affected African Americans over every 100 years. They say that we have Ma'afa, we have a total implosion of our communities and traumatization of the community every 100 years here. So it's been going on every 100 years. Um, I think it's funny that there was 50 men in the Senate that gave us a Juneteenth, but want to take away our voting rights. So interesting. Um, and so this committee decided to look at the full impact of slavery in California, and basically says that they often sanctioned and participated in African Americans from widespread terror and violence. So, violence was a real major issue in controlling Africans in America. The brutalization of us, the physical brutalization of us, even today. That's why George Floyd is so painful. Because we've seen this before. This happened to us 400 years ago, to the men, to the women, to the children. Um, and it continues today. I think the numbing of our community to this historical intergenerational trauma is one of the things I'll always continue to work on all my life. This is why I'm talking about this, because it impacts the healthcare that I provide. And so now we're looking at social determinants, food, clothing, and shelter. We have a number of people that are homeless. We have a number of people that are incarcerated. Well, now everyone's having that problem. And now we're looking at and we see that some of the things that have happened are not of our control, not in our ability to change. That's the impact of an institution like slavery in the Americas, in America. Um, and it says, so they talk about things like the slave codes. So the American colonial slave codes created a new type of slavery. It was different from the slavery which existed in pre-modern times. So understand that the slavery that existed in America was totally unique. Um, and the uniqueness of it is that it broke up families. It dehumanized the man in the family. And it made the woman a sexual mule. And in that context, the children of those rapes weren't the mothers or the fathers. They were the property of that plantation owner. And I think that that needs to clearly be understood that the ownership of a human being by another human being dehumanizes both human beings. Um, it states that the babies were enslaved at birth for their entire lives and for the entire lives of their children and children's children. These laws deny political, legal, and social rights to free and enslaved black people alike in order to more closely control enslaved people. Uh, there were African Americans during slavery that were free, they just didn't have any rights. And at any time could be shipped into slavery. Imagine you're free one day, and then one day you wake up and you're enslaved. And you can't leave. And understand enslavement, the taking of your right to be, to free garments, to have own property, to form a relationship, to form a family, to have a job, all that was controlled. Every aspect of our lives was controlled. And you ask why we have bad health. You ask why we have bad mental health. The Civil War did not free us from this trauma. Abraham Lincoln did not slave. In fact, Abraham Lincoln says that if he could preserve the Union and free slaves, he would. If he could keep slaves enslaved and preserve the Union, he was about the Union. He wasn't about slavery. Um, and I think that that kind of needs to be understood. So the big issue, I think, with advanced race theory and these kinds of things, that it talks about history in the context that the real history, not the history. There's always his story, and then there's history. And this is one of the shows where we're just going to talk about this because they're great solutions, but you have to understand the problem in order to deal with the solution. And for a long time in the society, we have been deemed the problem. And there's not been a solution if you think you are the problem. Because it's easier to be a problem than have a solution. I always tell my patients, I say it's easier to have mental illness than mental health. Mental illness just says that you be what you are. Mental health says that you take control and you want a difference. That's the unique piece about this. I want to thank the legislature, California legislature. Governor Newsom signed this into law. The legislature personally, in the last few legislatures, had to agree to this. I want to thank them for allowing the truth to come out and let the chips fall where they may. This is the history that needs to be told. This history needs to be shared. This history we need to have. Because the history that they've been teaching is one of glorification of one of the most brutal periods in American history, the slave trade. And they talk about this that Again, a lot of laws were made for us, were made to control us, and they continue to be that way too. These laws divided white people from black people by making interracial marriage a crime. Some of these laws survived well into the 20th century. The Supreme Court only declared that outline of interracial marriage was unconstitutional in 1967. 1967, 1968, less than 20, 30 years. I think my math's not that good. But understand that prior to 1967, you could not marry who you chose. There definitely could be no black and white marriages. Just made under the Constitution in 1967. It says, well, and it's California. California was in the Union in 1850 as a free state, and the early government support. In the early government supported slavery. Did you know that California supported slavery? I thought that was so wild. Here we are in the great state of California, sunshine, you know, beaches, and redwood trees, and all that good stuff. But initially, when they entered as a free state, they accepted slavery. They didn't say, no, this is wrong. We don't want to do this. Because it was tied to the economy, it was tied to the functioning, it's tied to the intersection of the country. It's like the stock market. You couldn't have had America without slavery. Um, and so that um, they they had pro-white Southerners that held a great deal of power in the state legislature at that time. In the court system among California's represented in the U.S. Congress, 37 scholars estimated up to 1,500 enslaved Africans lived in California in 1852. So this was a slave state. California was a slave state. All the states were slave states. Even Native Americans held slaves, which is kind of interesting. Seems like everybody could traumatize Africans in there. Um, so, um, so as I was saying, California passed and enforced a fugitive slave law that was harsher than the federal uh, fugitive slave law, and this made California a more pro-slave state than most other free states. Again, there was nowhere in America that you could not be returned from being a slave to a re-slave. You didn't have the protections of the government, of the police, of the politicians, because slavery was big business. Um, and it wasn't until 1959, which again another law right passed for to protect equal rights for all citizens, and the 15th Amendment, which prevented states from uh, denying a person their life, the 15th Amendment. Um, and also allowing the right to vote based on race. These things were slow, they ebbed and flowed. There's always been a discussion around our ability to vote and our freedom. Because voting in this country allows you to have freedoms, to pick your representative, to pick someone who will speak for you, like Barbara Lee speaks for us. But without that right, or that right minimized, or whitewashed, or limited, then you don't have any rights in the society. And even when the voting is fair and square, the system has an issue with it. It must be corrupt if people of color are winning elections. It must be corrupt if people of color have their own representation. It has to be. So the discussion, the great moral question in the society is, are we fair and square, or are we going to lie about this? Seems we're going to lie about this. Um, and what I mean by that is that in the highest court in the land, several of those justices got to court and said they weren't going to mess with a woman's right to choose. Well, again, what we say and what we do, two totally different things. And now, fortunately, they have to fear for their lives because of decisions like this. It's unfortunate. People shouldn't do that. We should be able to agree to disagree, but you should always be honest too. If this is where you are, and this is where you come into those committee meetings saying, yes, if I become Supreme Court justice, I'm going to reverse Roe versus Wade. That's going to be one of my big things to do, because everyone that was elected there was elected by Republican, Democrat, was we put with the mindset that they were going to overturn it at some point. So I thought about that. And the white paper is really good. Again, I just encourage people to go and review it and read it. A part that I took out that was really kind of interesting to me, that in July 5th of 1852, Frederick Douglass gave a speech to a crowd about 600 mostly white anti-slave activists in Rochester, New York, the day of Independence Day. Why is that unique for me? Because July the 4th is my birthday. And I've always said that although my mother had me on that day, that's America's birthday, not my birthday. And what I mean by that is that all the things they hold true and dear on that day, that's America's dream. I'm still looking for that dream for my community, people that love me. So he, if you don't know who Frederick Douglass, please Google. Brilliant man, brilliant abolitionist, one of the voices in the anti-slavery movement, the anti-abolitionist movement, and he said, and he was talking to this group of benefactors. He said that he began praising the courage of the nation's founders in winning their freedom from the British Empire. But Douglas did come to but Douglas did not come to celebrate American independence and liberty. The United States was founded on the idea that all men, and we should say women, are created equal. But white Americans enslaved their fellow African Americans and notoriously hated all men whose skins were not colored of their own. For Douglas, the 4th of July only highlighted the immeasurable distance between free white Americans and enslaved African Americans. I think that still exists today. So if you think I'm supposed to be lesser than you, it goes to healthcare too. I'll just take a side. Is that if you view me, I come into your office, your clinic, I'm laid out in the street, having been shot, and you don't see me as equal, as just as important, say, as you would someone that looked like you, then less care is given already. Just the mindset of that. So that's why we don't trust healthcare systems, because inherently we go into them and they inherently always hurt us, mistrust us, give us the wrong thing, don't provide us the entire picture of care, don't talk to us humanly. And then you wonder why we don't want to interface with it. So that's why I don't celebrate uh, July 4th. Although my mother, with her beautiful self, almost died having me. And I share this publicly because uh, I was born in High Hospital, public hospital, only one that black folk at that time could go to. She was a poor black woman and her son, and I was on the way, and I wanted to come. So, yeah, she almost bled to death having me, and if not for a really intelligent intern, she probably would have bled to death. And that's why I like public health. That's why I like public hospitals. That's why I like. That's why I went into healthcare, uh, because someone saved my life, and he didn't have to. And he saved it at a community hospital, which Highland Hospital is still today. It's a community hospital. So, a little on the side there. Um, and so he said in this talk, he said, the rich inheritance of justice, liberty, and prosperity and independence bequeathed by your father is shared uh, by you, but not by me. He explained, you may rejoice, I must mourn. Frederick Douglass' speech about the 4th of July shows the conflict in the heart of America. The United States prides itself on liberty, equality, and justice for all, but for over 4 years, white people of European ancestry built and continued a brutal caste system based on false notions of racial difference, white people at the top, people of African descent at the bottom. What's the difference today? I don't think there's a difference. I don't think we've moved the needle that far from 400 years, because now the discussion is, well, um, for the couple of years back, I was too fixated on race. Uh, we should get over that. Um, well, the dominant culture hasn't gotten over it. In fact, I remember them screaming in a night visual, you will not replace me. The great replacement theory. I thought race was over. I thought we would pass that, but I guess not. It affects our health. It affects our housing. It affects our ability to grow. It affects the wealth gap. And I think the reason why folks don't want to talk about it is that when you get to the real history, it isn't very attractive for those that are in power. Um, and I think that men like Frederick Douglass took major hits in their life, in their wealth, and the ability to grow old. Um, and he stated that, it says, well, it said it allowed American colonies and early United States to, uh, from and our colonial government and U.S. governments at all levels, allowed to participate in exploitation, abuse, and terror and murder of people of African descent, uh, so white people could profit as much as possible from their enslavement. It's always been about the dollar. And why am I talking about this? Because for a number of years I could not. There was no factual data. If it were put together, it was put together in such a convoluted form that it didn't make sense to you. They always say if you want to hide something from a black person, put it in a book. Who are they? They that understand that when we educate ourselves, become knowledgeable, and become well read, and become the Renaissance people that we are, then we are a hard deal to mess with. Um, so what they talk about in this white paper is the systematic oppression on all levels. And what I did not understand as I grew up is that how intimate there was in a relationship of keeping Africans in America oppressed. From where we lived, from where we went to school, from who provided us health care, to where we got our loans, to what we were able to buy, where we could go at night, sundowning. Got to be in before sundown. And it's almost forgotten because we think that we're past that. And then George Floyd happens. Again, when I was born, it was Emmett Till. the thing about it is that at some point in time, you can mark an African American being murdered or killed or abused or lynched for just being who he was. I think people forget that Martin Luther King was assassinated. He should be alive right now. But these same white supremacists they talk about, and maybe even more so, if we look at the institutional structure, this man had to be silenced because what he was moving toward was a discussion around poverty, around class, and they didn't want him to do that. So again, um, and so the paper is entitled, uh, and one of the things that came up was that uh, the discussion of, in California at least, the lives of enslaved people during the domestic slave trade. I mean, the paper is really, um, it talks about, it gives an executive summary, and we'll probably talk about that. They do an intro, you do enslavement, racial terror, political disenfranchisement, housing and segregation, separate unequal education, racism and environmental infrastructure. Uh, 11 is uh, pathologizing, pathologizing, making a disease process out of life. Control over creative and cultural and intellectual life. Ask George Washington Carver how much money he made up these 160, 100, almost 200, 300 inventions on the peanut. He was truly a Renaissance scientist because he gave them. Well, not only gave them, taken, right? Um, the stolen labor and hindered opportunity and unjust legal system. This is great reading. This is like, I mean, it's like great popcorn reading, you know, because it tells in a very succinct way why we are the way we are and how we got here, which up until this time was something that was in the halls of academia, right? If you want to keep it unknown, hide it in a book. So we have a lot of history to learn. Again, reparations, repairing or keeping, reparations, the act of making amends, offering or giving satisfaction for a wrong or injury, something done or given as amends or satisfaction. I think we fit that bill. And again, my discussion with this is not the financial or property or 40 acres and the mule that we never got. It's to understand why it is we're the way we are and why we're having so many problems in America. Why we've had so many problems in America. Because it was designed that way. I want to say that there's an event that we're going to be doing here. It's Juneteenth. It's going to be on Saturday, June 25th. And this is a Barbara Howard Eyes of the Conscious Mind production. It's the 15th annual Beach Green Minds Project, Juneteenth. The 2022 celebration is going to be on Brockhurst Street between Market and San Pablo. Uh, and it's pretty nice event. It's been going for a couple of years now, and I think it's something that if you get a chance to, please take a look. I want to thank all the Facebook family, and as I become more media savvy as opposed to media challenged at 66, I have to learn more things now. That's my grandkids still want to learn more things. Again, this show is dedicated to my grandchild, uh, Jamie Miller Pearson. Lost her a few months ago. She was murdered. Gun violence. That's why I'm wearing my orange tie, my orange bow tie, because of gun violence. I know that we are still reeling from these mass murders, but again, women, and particularly women of color, are more likely to be killed by a handgun by somebody they know, who is an intimate partner, friend, or somebody like that. That's who's killing women of color. So I am concerned about the mass killings, but I'm more concerned about uh, men with handguns that are killing their partners, basically. Uh, Again, I want to thank you for tuning in. I want to thank this show. I want to thank all the folks that are making this possible for us. We got some exciting things going on. We're going to start bringing on some guests, and we're going to start talking about healthcare systems and different systems that might work for us as a community. I want to thank all the partnerships. I want to thank Edie Komodo out there, who's going to be helping us put a real serious plan together, a business plan. And Carolyn Crawford, who's going to be coming on the show talking about healthcare systems. And we need to have a comprehensive healthcare system. We tend to do better not at hubs. We tend to do better in medically based, person-centered homes where all the resources are there. Ideally, the mental health service would be there, the medical service would be there working in conjunction on a particular problem. The way California is moving now, by 2022, in order for you, if you're a Medicare Medi-Cal patient, and you enter the health system, you should be able to get health care there and mental health care at any interest point. So we'll see how that goes. I also, I think it's important that, again, while we're talking about this, is to lend context to the things we want to change and how we want to change them. And once you understand the context in which you have to make those changes, then they should be easier to make because you understand the importance. Understand that basically, um, when we are put in communities where we are unable to have freedom of access, not the proper financing to fund that community, not the proper infrastructure, then you're going to fail. It's designed for you to fail. Flint, Michigan is a prime example of the infrastructure failing its residents in regards to water. And this paper talks about the wholesale discussions um, in regards to a lot of these issues. And I think that we need to be better educated about this. I think I want to again thank the legislature for putting the work and time in to allow this to happen. And I think that we are going to be a better community, a better group of Californians, a better society, because I think that knowledge is power. And um, that's what's important, that we become a better educated group of people. Yeah, not to run off emotion or attitude, but understand why we're where we're at. And again, it's the California Task Force to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. This is the interim report. The final report will probably be around 23, 24. But it is, just super reading. I'm gonna take some stuff out of it. Let's see. Here's one of the things I like. It says more than 50% of the U.S. presidents from 1789 to 1885 enslaved African Americans. So imagine that. He said 50%. I always said the first 10 presidents of America were enslavers. Well, they're saying almost half now. Half of the presidents own slaves. That's kind of unique. And then you can understand why Birth of a Nation played at the White House. Uh, and why we were treated the way we were treated. Um, as I said before, this is the American colonial slave codes created a new type of slavery that was different than slavery which existed in pre-modern times. Babies were enslaved at birth uh, for their entire lives and for the entire lives of their children's children's children. The laws denied political, legal, and social rights to free and enslaved black people alike in order to more easily control and enslave people. These laws divided white people from black people by making interracial marriage a crime. Again, not turned back until 67. Um, again, I think this is important because you need to understand the history of your state. And the discussion around California being a free state was just that. It was a discussion. It's not a free state. It's a slave state. In fact, its laws to return you to your enslaver were more harsher than the federal laws. Aren't they doing that in like voting and now women's right to choose? Haven't we seen this playbook before? You know, well, it's the playbook that they play. Um, and Here's a discussion around, and again, you might review the executive summary. Let's take this. Let's say housing segregation. In California, the federal, state, and local government created segregated through redline zone ordinance and decisions where to build schools and highways um, and discriminatory federal mortgage policy. So, what's the context of a community? All those things, from the fact of your ability to borrow money so that you can build your community. Redlining, redlining. Look it up. It means I'm on one side, you're on the other, and you decide that you're on is better. So we consistently have a discussion about the devaluing of people of color, of Africans in America. Most definitely. That's how the playbook was developed. So I know people think that California was this and California was that. Well, California was just as bad, or in some cases worse. And again, the reason why I bring this up is that understand that if it's happening at every level of government, the services you get from that government aren't going to be good because they're colored to be less. They're colored to be not as good. Um, Yeah, it says nationally, non-white school districts get 23 billion less than the predominantly white districts. This is now. This is not. This is not a couple of years ago. The uh, the chapter of racism and environmental infrastructure. Uh, and I'm just kind of outlining the discussion because you guys can go read about the solutions because this paper is unique in the fact that it provides solutions. It just doesn't talk about the problem and will always be educated, solution oriented, but understand the problem is huge and immense, and it needs to have your understanding, so that we have done a lot of self hate. We have done a lot of second guessing. We have done a lot of discussions around disrespecting and disrespecting each other. The biggest thing with young Africans is don't disrespect me because they're right, they haven't been respected. So that discussion has to happen on all levels so that our young men that are 18 feel respected as opposed to picking up a R-15 and going, especially marrying children. So that's the kind of discussions that we're going to have here. And um, again, it says that just in terms of housing, it says in California, national patterns are replicated in California. Black Americans are more likely than white Americans to live in overcrowded housing and near hazardous waste. Black neighborhoods are more likely to lack free canopy trees. For instance, Black Californians in San Joaquin Valley were excluded from most urban areas with access to clean water as a result of redlining. So this is the kind of architecture that draws us. They have a section 8 on pathologizing the black family. In 2019, African American uh, were 14% of the population, but black children were 22% of the foster population. And when you hear about the foster care system in California, you should put a person of color there, or a young female, or LGBT community person, because that's who's in foster care, and that's where this trauma is going now. And if you destructed the family from the beginning, then you're left with, 23% of us in foster care. Um, and it talks about an unjust legal system, mental and physical harm and neglect. It says that compared to white Californian, compared to white California men, black California men are more 5 times more likely to die of prostate cancer. Well, you don't trust the medical system. We feel it's abusive toward us. It disrespects us, and they don't listen to us. So, and also there's a stigma attached. I'm really understanding. We may have to talk about stigma, what that implies for our care, mental or physical, structural or cultural, the stigma involved. Says that in California, and this is mental and physical harm and neglect. It said the national trends that are assuming in California, the life expectancy of the average black Californian was 7.51 years, 6 years shorter than the state average. Black babies are more likely to die in infancy, and black mothers giving birth at a rate almost 4 times higher than the average California. I take that as issue because 30 years ago, infant mortality, African American women #1. We're in 2022, African American women are still #1. And it's something I don't want our women to be women of color, women that are my mother and my sister to be #1 in. My grandchild, my great grandchild was a preemie. And we had to watch her at Alta Base for a number of months. I was so proud of my grandchild. She breastfed and she came up and she was just there for her. And she was recovering. She was like 2 pounds, 2 ounces. She's got an iPhone. She's calling her granddad when she has time. So I suggest that people pull this document up and take a read. It's very interesting. It's very dynamic. It's again related to California. Um, and what's kind of not looked at is racial terror. And I'm going to close it out with this because I think it's kind of good. It says, racial terror. After slavery, white Americans frequently aided by the government maintained the badges of slavery by carrying out violence and intimidation against African Americans for decades. Racial terror pervaded every aspect of post-slavery black life, prevented African Americans from building the same wealth of political influence as white Americans. It's always interesting that, for me as an African American man walking down the street and watching a white woman cross the street and clutch her purse. It always bothered me because I didn't know why she was doing it. But in reality, maybe she was clutching her purse and walking across the street because she knew that the violence was really being enacted on us and not on them. And she wanted to get out of the way. Um, we have a lot of work to do. I think this is one of the documents that I'm really excited about sharing. I think we should review it, make comments on it, and kind of understand how it fits into your life from a number of areas, whether it be um, political, whether it be housing, whether it be uh, the state of the black family, uh, control over our cultural and intellectual property. This is really must read reading. An unjust legal system. I mean, I think some things you should know, but maybe not. Um, because some people think everything is okay. It's real fair. Nothing happened. It's kind of like January 6th. The folks that aren't concerned about it said didn't anything happen. No one got hurt. It's fine. It was just a walk in the park. It wasn't like a Black Lives Matter um, uh, uh, protest. And I'm against violence in either aspect, but don't colorize it. Violence is violence. You know, hurting police is hurting police. Um, don't make it okay for you, but not okay for anyone else. That's what's kind of the issue. I think the last thing I'm gonna end with is the wealth gap. The wealth gap exists, and so the national picture in 2019, white households own 9 times more assets than black households. The wealth gap, and think about it, we're in COVID, we're in getting ready to be a recession, downturn in the economy. Um, all the free money is drying up, whatever the free money was at, and whoever was getting it, because I was getting any of it. Um, the wealth gap is in similar in California. The 2014 study of Los Angeles metro area found that the median value of liquid assets for native-born African Americans was $200 compared to 110,000 for white households. We got 200, they got over 100,000, 100K. How did that happen? Institutional, structural, racism on all levels. Oakland just declared racism a public health issue. Isn't that interesting? We always knew it was, but now it's clear. So I think shining light on things gives it clarity. It gives it vision. You're listening to Believe Radio. This is the Mess Now with George Pearson, PA. I want to thank everyone that's involved in the show, and we're gonna have Miss Howard doing her show next week, uh, and I'm gonna continue to uh, discuss this reparations paper, and because I think it's kind of a foundation document for us. Uh, and when the government takes a good look at itself, you have to respect that government, respect the leadership in that government. Uh, they want to hear the truth. They don't want to have it cherry coated. And you see the little blurbs on TV. Please read it. Go read it. Go see. Just read the executive summary, which is a kind of a synopsis of everything that's in the paper. And you'll find something you're like, wow, I didn't know that. That's what education should do. That's what lifelong learning should do. It should allow you to traverse and grow. I want to thank everyone for making this possible. My family, my mom, my dad, my stepdad, uh, all the people that are really, really doing so much who helped me grow to what I am today. I'm honored and blessed to be able to talk with you and share some of the things that sometimes are a little bit sensitive, but I mean, um, it's all about growth and learning and changing. I'm a lifelong learner. I will continue to be so. In fact, I'm studying for my boards, and yet we have taken them the sixth time in 2024. So it never stops. I want to thank Believe Radio, Etymology, Curtis, the whole crew, uh, and for giving me a chance to share some of the things that I think are important. And this is all related to our health. How you think, so shall you act. And we don't have a good foundation to change things, and plant-based diet, exercise, stress reduction is not going to be effective. Um, it's got about a few more seconds, and I wanted to say that um, we are blessed to be here. And there was a final piece in this paper that I'm going to share, and it's part of the executive summary. It says the American government at all levels, including California, has historically criminalized African Americans for the purpose of social control to maintain economic based on exploitation of black labor. The criminalization and enduring badge of slavery has contributed to awful policing of black neighborhoods and the school prison pipeline. That's my son. The mass incarceration of African Americans refuse to accept Africans as victims of other inequities nearly at every corner of the American and California legal systems that result in American and California criminal justice systems physically harms, imprisons, and kills African Americans more than any racial group relative to their percentage of the population. In other words, we have a small percentage, but we get 100% of the harm in healthcare, in housing, in jobs, and you name it. You name it. You name it. And it's not. Uh, no one's upset. It's just the way it is. No one's upset. It's just the way it is. I want to thank you for taking time. Um, we'll be back here next week. Thanks my Facebook family. Hopefully, the Facebook thing show. We'll see. I'm learning this stuff. We're all learning together. But I want to thank all you for finding the time and space to listen and play this. Play it to your friends. Please share it and in comments so I can learn to get better. I want to get better. I want to do the things um, that you want to hear. Maybe we can even have some live issues where folks call in. I think it's always fun to do that. Um, Again, I want to thank the staff crew, and I want to thank Barbara Howard for Odds Times Soul and Etymology and Curtis and all the folks that make Believe Radio what it is. And we want it to be. Let's keep growing together. Let's keep doing. Hey, remember Juneteenth. Uh, check it out. I want to again thank you for being. Last shout out to Stephanie and Mark. Hey man, it's gonna be a good event. Uh, yeah, my executive producer for many years has uh, decided to tie the knot or not the tie. He's got a beautiful little son. Just a cute little family. I love them both. And I get a chance to meet the son. I'm not before yet, but just good people. That's the reason why I'm here. Just good people. Again, thank you for tuning in, and we will call it a day. Bye-bye.